Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Caffeine Karrots. I'm Prithvi, and it's my great pleasure to have Brandon Almendarez on this session with us today. Brandon is one of the most practical operators I have interacted with in the community, in the customer success community. And Brandon, welcome to Caffeine Karrots.
Thank you for having me.
He's a good friend, he's a good customer, and he's a good proponent of CS overall. So looking forward to having this conversation with you, Brandon.
Likewise.
We'll jump straight into it. What got you into customer success? You have been doing this for a while now.
Yeah, for a very long time. So interestingly enough, I actually started in sales. And one of the hardest parts of being in sales for me was to detach myself from the customer after the sale had closed. So to me, that's where I struggled. So over time, having this type of rapport, this relationship with the customers that have just trusted me enough to purchase a product is the number one reason why I jumped on the other side of the fence, was to keep the relationship and then also kind of hold the salespeople accountable for what they're actually selling. So it put me in a position to kind of support them further. So.
No, it's wonderful. And as you have been in this community, and customer success obviously is evolving rapidly every year. I mean, we are seeing changes and more adoption of the philosophy itself over the past couple of years happen pretty rapidly. Any thoughts on, from your perspective, what you have seen evolve the most in customer success?
Yeah, growth, just overall. I think that we're seeing a lot more of people being named customer success. It's turned into more of a title than an actual responsibility. And with that itself causes its own obstacles and challenges, not only as a director, but as a CSM, and ultimately impacts an organization negatively. But I'm seeing a lot of that going on.
Yeah, I'm sure. And as you have implemented customer success in your current organization as well as elsewhere, what would be the number one mistake you have seen organizations make when they put a lens on customer success or try implementing customer success for the first time?
Man, there's many of them. I would say if I had to narrow it down, it would be lack of the responsibilities. It really goes back to understanding the true meaning of customer success management. It is more than a title. It's a journey, and it requires a lot of, from what I found, is almost anybody can do it. So it's almost no matter what profession you're in, there's a piece that you can take from each profession and mold in a professional customer success manager. So it's really quick about identifying how to leverage that particular piece of knowledge that new CSM has. So when you take that and you zoom out and you think about an entire organization, you have a group of experts in all different walks of life. And being able to streamline that and scale it is where you find your success, the most success. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. There's one thing I forgot in Brandon's introduction. So Brandon represents a company called Lexipol, and Lexipol is one of the largest technology providers to the police department, the fire department, emergency medical services. So Brandon, as you head customer success at your organization, you handle a large number of accounts. You obviously have a complex product structure. You have multiple products. You have a fairly large customer success team, multiple business units, so the complexities add up. You have a very high retention rate. You have been very successful in what you do. What makes you tick?
Going back is my team, right? I would say what makes me tick and drives me every day, and as it relates directly to what process we're going to roll out, is the team. When you have a very large team that supports multiple products that are multi-tiered, it's very important for the team to understand why we move different directions so often. And a lot of that is important. If you were to just change direction prematurely without telling them, then you have just nothing but total chaos. And I've seen in the past experience, that when you do that, chaos equals churn. Always, all of the time. And there's no arguing that is a fact. So for me, what makes me tick is exactly that. The numbers itself, I have found, retention, churn, et cetera, all falls in place if you have a united front. And it's the larger your team, the more products, the more verticals, the more tiered that you're supporting, the harder it gets, the more complex that it gets. So making me tick is being able to watch my team not only change direction as one, but actually succeed. And I use retention churn as a measurement on if I did that appropriately. Yeah, so.
And I've always been a proponent, and I'm glad you mentioned that for better outcomes in customer management, you as much manage the customer as you manage your internal stakeholders. So it's I think what you're saying, the more number of products, verticals, customer segments, etc., the more internal potential challenges.
Yes.
So I think you'd have to kudos to you to be able to navigate that well. At SmartKarrot, just moving tracks a little bit, Brandon. So we are seeing a trend of SmartKarrot being used, and generally when I speak to the community as well, a lot more attention towards account expansion. So we are saying, okay, retention is there, renewal is there, but your business might be such that you have multi-year contracts, et cetera, et cetera. So every year renewal may or may not be top of mind, but account expansion is top of mind, not only every year, every quarter. So with that same base of customers, what are you doing to expand revenue? And as we implement at your organization as well, that's obviously one of the primary use cases we are trying to solve for. But what are your thoughts? Where is this account expansion piece coming from at Lexipol as well as in the industry in general?
I would say as of recently, I would say there's really three causes. I mean, if you were to narrow it down, one is COVID happens, right? So following COVID, a lot of technology companies started to come together at a very rapid rate in order to survive the potential recession, right? The whole game changed, right? So with that comes hey, we've just purchased these new product lines. Now we have all this opportunity to not only generate revenue, but to have a better total solution or a better offering for our customers. So everybody gets really excited about that. I know CSMs do. CSMs love to have the opportunity to pick up the phone, call a customer and say, I got something new, I got something exciting. And so we started to see a lot of that. The other, again, is also because of COVID. So everything changed. So everything completely changed. So you had companies that were closing down. You had it to where the whole industry itself took this completely different direction. And so overall, just the nature of that, has happened. So to help combat that, again, now what they're doing is rather than even just cross-selling, these companies to survive are looking for other opportunities to create new product lines. And that is to generate revenue because maybe the outside, the incoming revenue that they used to once see has gone away. So companies had to become a lot more creative in finding a way to make up for that loss of revenue. So a lot of products were starting to pop up, and so there was this cross-selling that happened there. And the third one is that you just have businesses that are number one goal from the day they start is to grow. They want to be the biggest, they want to be the best. And in order to do that, there's a lot of acquisitions that occur in order to have that total solution. So they're always out on the hunt looking for companies that complement their existing services. And I think that those are the three reasons that we're seeing this huge demand for cross-sells. And it's actually become, from what I've seen, even over this, the course of the past 2-3 years, it's starting to become more important. It's starting to become the mission. And a lot of the core values of companies are actually designed around cross-selling and revenue growth. So, I would say that's the number 3 reasons for now.
So what does that mean for you and your team? I mean, in this sudden change, or let's say it's changed over a period of time, but now, hey, you have to cross-sell this. Tomorrow, maybe you need to cross-sell that. And it's a ground practical reality. There's nothing bad in it because you have acquired a new company. You now need to leverage that acquisition cost. So you're looking at cross-selling that new product line. What does it mean for you and your team?
Well, you said it best, right? So it unfortunately, in some ways, it is just go and cross-sell. It's not that easy, right? It's just not. There's so many complications that are involved with the actual function of being successful at cross-selling. So what does it mean to me and my team is it goes back to being a change agent all of the time, right? To me, this is the most important thing that you're going to find in CSM is for them to understand that where you're standing today, you will not be tomorrow. And so you've always got to set that expectation. So, with that being said, it equals chaos. It does. So you have to be very smart. You've got to really have a strategy. You've got to have a methodology in place. But more important than all, the CSMs have to believe your mission. They have to believe that because at the top of a company they're saying to cross-sell, they've got to understand the total importance of that. They've got to have a passion for that. They've got to look at it as an opportunity for them to offer their customers more opportunity themselves, more support, full solution. So, yeah, that's the impact.
And I was going to get there in a little while, but since you mentioned that, and I know we discussed this offline sometime earlier, you had mentioned about your team being coached on not selling,
Correct,
but consulting,
yes,
right, and trying to add value. That's something I really like, and I think the audience who's hearing this will too, because it is in fact a good way to sell end of day,
right,
by not explicitly selling. So here's a revenue target. I'm going and talking to the customer. Give us a little bit more color on how do you go about doing that?
Sure. So I have put it upon myself. I have a personal mission to change the word cross-selling. Let it exist. Let it be there. But overall, selling over time has become a negative statement for a consumer. I sit here today, and even if I walk into a car dealership and I know that I'm approaching a car salesman, I already know that this person's mission is to sell me, right? So the important thing is to change the name, right? Let the CSMs know we are not selling. Another thing too, man, there's a lot of stress that comes around that word selling. When you ask a CSM who is designed by nature to nurture, to sell, selling to a CSM means asking the hard questions and setting yourself up to close a line of business. The last thing CSMs are closers. If a company solely relies on CSMs to sell, cross-sell at that, you're probably going to fail going that direction. So the first thing was, the mindset, right, is really bringing the team together and asking them what ticks. What is your definition of selling? You almost always get have almost a very uncomfortable conversation almost all the time. I'm not a salesman. This isn't what I signed up for. And they're right. They're 100% right. That's not what they are. They're nurturers. So you really talk, bringing the team together to go, well, let's not call it that anymore. What is it, right? At the end of the day, we're just discovering, And so I think the very first thing that you should do in any organization is change that mindset when you're dealing with people that are the closest to the customer, that are designed to nurture. So definition of selling has got to go out. It just can't be there. Yeah.
So you had mentioned a term called discover and DNA. What was that full form?
Sure. So I'll tell you, and I can't take credit for that term. This goes back to getting the team to understand it. So I put together a competition internally from my team and said, we all agree we don't like the term selling. Yep. What can we do about it? So I put together a friendly competition. I allowed all of the team to provide a list of different names, and it was very interesting to see the names that were actually provided. Very creative. That's one thing you have with CSMs. They're very creative. They live in that world. They face all the problems. So naturally, it creates creators. So it was good to see this. And it wasn't easy to choose. But one of our CSMs came up with the term DNA. And not only is it a good play on the word, because CSMs, to me, and it's a whole nother topic, but the importance of a CSM is we are the backbone, right? It's DNA. It's there. But it related to the department needs assessment.
The department needs
assessment. Mm-hmm. So at this point, we're not selling. We are going to assess this department to find out what they need. What are your needs? What are your goals? What are you trying to do? That is a function of CSM, right? We want to understand their goals so we can get them there.
Right. So just by aligning well to that department's need, you actually end up doing more for them, hopefully over time.
Organically.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Stepping back again now a little bit. So as we look at solving for the use case of account expansion, right? And obviously there is a lot of pressure from the board, from the executive management, where our quarterly numbers. How do you structure solving for this problem? In my head, top of mind, just to get you going, and we have been discussing this during our implementation calls with you as well. Identifying who to go after.
Yes.
Then how do you go after? And then you track whether you are going after them properly or not. And then rinse, repeat is really what you're trying to do. But I'm sure you will be able to add more details to this.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you what was successful, right? So after you've got across the mindset in changing the way a CSM thinks in a positive way, you then go, okay, how do we execute, right? I can't just, a word is not enough. Yeah. I can't go discover, right? One important thing to mention here is that CSMs do a lot. And I think everybody agrees that's ever been in this world. And one of the key problems is that from the top, executive, when things change its course, people often forget what someone actually does every single day. So in order for me to create efficiencies, to create momentum, and also the confidence, I've just told these people that are not used to really going after the business in this manner to go after it. So I got to set them up for success. So my first line of business is getting together all the data that I can and going, what would make me feel comfortable in picking this phone up and calling this customer that I may have not spoken with in 2-3 months? Well, it's the data, right? So I go through and I find really good data that I feel is important. Anywhere from tenure, what is their current health? Did they rate us on our NPS once upon a time ago? And what current products do they currently hold? Right. And you take all that together and you're able to create a what I would term or coin as a hit list. This is where you take this now and feel confident about calling that customer that's been here 14 years. Yep. Their health is green. They currently only have one product. I mean, if they've been with us 14 years, they're loyalists. They're running really well. We are doing a disservice by not approaching them to let them know, hey, did you hear about this new product that we offer? So that's where I started, right? That's the most important thing, is creating that hit list, identifying what's important, and getting that into the hands of the CSMs to execute.
Right. And what you're trying to do now is also taking that ahead, create that hit list for every individual who addresses a certain pool of accounts.
Correct.
Because it'll be different for...
It's different for every single CSM. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Now, what do you do after that?
Well, from there, that goes right back into, not dismissing that churn is important, retention is important, health is important, right? So we don't want to disturb our business. So from there, you go, where can I find the time to break this down into a manner that works for the CSM without throwing them off tilt, without them just going, I'll tell you something on this too. Something you have to caution is that when you get a team really pumped up, right? And you're giving them the tools needed to succeed, it's very easy for them to want to be distracted, especially if it's new to them. You're breaking the cycle. They pick up the phone, they're pumped up, they get someone on and they're like, yeah, absolutely, I want to hear more about this. And that creates a good steam and good forward momentum. But that was one of the challenges I faced, was like, okay, wait a minute, what about this? You had to process this. And they're like, well, we're doing our DNA, and they get excited about it. So that right there was very challenging, where at the point, in a good way, it was challenging, that I had to tell them to step back a little bit. Like, hey, just make 5 phone calls today. Make 10. Don't call the 260 people that I sent over to you, right? So it was a good thing to see, because there's nothing, I would say as a leader, there's nothing more rewarding than to see your team happy and excited about doing something that you've asked them to do. But that was the challenge. It was a good challenge, but.
Right. Wonderful. How do you balance out between what the industry has been calling tech touch and the human touch, right? Obviously, there is a balance required, and it's different for different organizations, maybe different for different product lines. What do you think is the right way to balance that out?
This is a challenge I think everybody faces, if I understand your question correctly. By tech, are you referring to splitting the difference between a customer needing technical support and a customer needing health?
No. So when you are, say you have identified a list of accounts now, right? So there are some communication which can happen automated, right? You don't need to get on a phone call. But there are certain things which can only be discussed in person or in a phone call, right? So how do you optimize balancing out between, hey, these are repetitive tasks, I don't need to do that, so probably I'll run a campaign or I'll create some automated rule which creates more bandwidth for your CSM team. And then the rest, they actually have to do that in-person human touch.
So I think they work hand in hand. So this also goes with strategy, right? So what I would say is the best way to handle that is, one is, first of all, understanding your message to begin with. How strong is your brand, okay? So is relying on a campaign enough? Is that touch point enough, right? Do we do this at introductory? Do we do this after a follow-up, right? So trying to find that in many cases is very challenging. I would say that previously I've ran some campaigns that I found to be very successful, and those were the accounts that, what I would say, I like to double dip. It's no secret, right? I think that any business, the number one goal of most businesses, and I hope this is not a secret, but is to maximize the amount of accounts that a CSM manages. The only way you can do that is through efficiency, right? And this is why this is very important. So in order to do that, if you've got someone managing 700 departments, and you throw a couple other things in the equation like tiered pricing, what product do they have? How much are they spending with us a year, a month? What does this model look like? You have to really look at it and go, okay, you almost have to segment these tiers to go, I want to touch this account that's of a lower end, but my time is consumed by this tier and this tier, right? So you do what I would consider double dipping at this point. Not only are you touching the customer, but you're touching a customer with reasoning, with value behind it. So you almost tier it. You go on these lower end accounts that I wish I could touch, I can't do. Let's touch them. Let's consider this an opportunity to go in and say, hey, customer, I don't know if you're aware, but you're healthy. I think you are ready now to have this conversation about other products that we're offering. And that would be that campaign. Whereas the other tiers, and what I mean by other tiers is the higher you go up in revenue, it's not that they deserve that type of attention, because I feel like all of them do. From $1 to $1 million. A CSM should want to give them all the same level of service. But it's impossible. It is. But those larger tiered customers becomes a more complex conversation. So if I look at something and I start with, let's just say revenue, it's an important piece. And then I look at the actual department size. I go, do we base this off revenue or do we base this off department size? Revenue doesn't necessarily mean there's more complexity there. The size of the department does. So you go after the size of the department first, of tenured nature, and you have those conversations, because from there, that's a true discovery. That's really finding out more about their operation, and again, finding out the end goals. Those conversations itself can be challenging, because a good CSM will also always be in a position after doing discovery to say, you're not ready. You're not ready to move into another product, so.
No, I'm glad you said that, because, one of the, I've been a firm believer in being able to, what we call internally at SmartKarrot, segment out customers and make it dynamic enough. So once you create a dynamic segment, it keeps polling your data, as you mentioned, and then it'll be different every day. Because depending on the product line you are trying to expand into, or the vertical you are in, the whole thing is going to be very different. So how do you manage all of that at scale? It's very difficult unless, like you correctly said, segment out and create those specific rules. Wonderful. Let me ask you, since we have you here, and you're a great team manager, and you have a very successful team. Tell us something about what you have learned about managing specifically a customer success team. I mean, it's a challenging role.
I'm still learning, right? It is a very challenging role. I would say the number one thing is how impressed I am by the amount of talent that you have. So the bigger that the pool of people that you get, the more talent you have. And this goes back to identifying that and tapping into it to help empower them as individuals. And, I learned that I've, throughout my career, I have had people with PhDs work for me, right? And so why are you customer success? What happened along the way? And you kind of learn their life story, and most of the times they have a very good story on why they choose CSM, why they want to actually relate to the customer. And so I would say that's what I've learned the most. Now, the other thing that I've learned about having a really large team, and the larger that it gets, the more complicated it gets to streamline. And I think anybody that's been through this will agree. And in order to streamline or in order to scale, you've got to have tools in place to do that. You can't just tell everyone to go a direction. It just doesn't work. But, that's the challenge.
So consistency and being able to drive, which brings me to the next question. That again, what's been your practical experience as you look at technology, leveraging technology as you scale?
Well, so I would say this. I'd say one thing that I've experienced, and I'll say as of recent, and this is a shared experience, even in the past. When a company grows, there's certain things that need to grow with it that often get forgotten, right? You grow so fast that you chase the money. Naturally, this is what companies do. And a lot of things get left behind. And I would say that one of those things and challenges that I've experienced, and this is anywhere that I've ever been, is that we have very rich data. We have tools that have very rich data. But the issue is they all live in different platforms. So it makes it very difficult to scale. And I would say that's one of the challenges. I mean, very many challenges, yeah.
Someone looking to come into customer success for a career, as a career choice. I mean, it is a great career choice today's date. What would be your one advice to potential CSMs, director of CS, VP CS? What would be your advice?
Be ready for change, accept it. Going back to some points I made earlier, where you stand today, you will not be tomorrow. And I think that is the key to being CS. Nothing else. You are walking into not only a very important position in any company. I'm very biased by it, but what I've seen customer success managers be able to accomplish when challenged is phenomenal. But the struggles are dealing with customer success managers that don't want to change. That, if you have this idea that going into a CSM role means that your 8 to 5 is going to be the same steps every single day, this is not for you. It is not the position for you. As a matter of fact, I make that a point when I'm interviewing for people to understand what they're walking into, and they have to want to accept challenge. They want to accept change. That is the same for a director. That is the same for a VP. And I'll tell you, one thing that's been very successful for me, and this is the advice that I give directors and VPs, aside from CS, is create partnerships. You have got to have partnerships across your entire function, because when you're dealing with product, you're dealing with development, you're dealing with finance, you're dealing with marketing, you've got to understand every single one of those sectors, those divisions, how they operate, how they beat, what are their roadmaps, why do they do this, why do they do that, in order for you to actually find a solution. If not, you're going to find resistance, and you're not going to get any movement. So you have to be very strategic as a director and a VP in order to get what the customer deserves, because we are the advocates and we're the voice of the customer. And the only way someone's going to listen to you is if they like you. I mean, let's be honest.
Yep. It is a people-to-people equation any day. Yeah. So let's flip the coin, Brandon, a little bit. So your advice to CSMs, VPs are well received. What would the same advice be for executive management?
Today, I would say that it's time for executives to start looking at CSM not as a cost, but as an investment. I think that that's very important. And the good news is I think we're starting to see a shift. We're starting to see it go that direction. CSMs are very operational. They kind of fall in this operational umbrella. And a lot of times that can hinder our ability to follow the growth of a company. You know, companies going after revenue are going to absolutely grow their sales force, which should, if you have a good sales force, is going to give you more accounts to manage. CSMs should follow that. And when we talk about all the many things, which I'm sure we've had conversations about and will in the future, is why is retention so important for a company? So as an executive, they've got to be looking at at least 5 miles out to go, this area is worth investing in.
Right. Oh, wonderful. It was great having you, Brandon. I think, you know, obviously this sort of discussion can continue, but we have a hard timeline, and I think we are pretty much at top of the mark. So wonderful having you. Thank you once again, and look forward to more discussions like this in the future.
Absolutely, same. Yeah.
Hopefully this will be helpful to the community as well.